Today's topic, buckle in. This is going to be a big one. Welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sparrow Spalding, founder of Sparrow Spalding Ministries and the Church of Christos, an online community where I give education and basically teach you how to live, heal, and thrive in a fallen, broken world. So we talk about everything from spirituality to health, wellness, mental health, trauma, all of it. All right. Today's topic is celibacy. Now, I recently came across, well, I was called to celibacy in the past, actually a couple of years. And it was an interesting call. It wasn't ever something I thought would happen to me. It didn't even occur to me. But that's a story I'll tell you about a little bit later. But not long ago, I came across the 4B movement taking place in South Korea. Now, the 4B movement is women just rising up and saying no to traditional gender roles and the patriarchy. And they're going to the extreme. I mean, they're saying no marriage, no dating, no sex, no childbirth. Now, they're saying none of these things with men. I'm not sure what that means for them, but for me, I'm looking at this like, wow, okay, we're not doing the traditional uh, marriage, family, and kids now for the women in this movement. And I asked myself, what would propel this movement? Is this another iteration of the feminist movement? I don't think so. I think the feminist movement came and it gave women some rights, and some people say it came from bad places. It came from the Bolsheviks. It came from, you know, um, people programming women to want to be like men. And there could be some truth to that. But we can't ignore the fact that women have been subjugated for millennia. I mean, since basically the dawn of man, right? Women have been the weaker sex, the lesser sex. Women, have not been treated as equals. So, the feminist movement came around, second wave, third wave, and women have gotten more rights, maybe a little more pay, but I think women have traded their souls in exchange for that because we were taught basically we need to be more like men. We need to get into our masculine energy, go out there, slay the dragons, go earn a paycheck, but then we'd still come home and take care of the majority of the household duties and responsibilities too. So it ended up being worse for women in a sense than, I mean, even though, we got some liberties, but I think until the 1970s, women weren't allowed to have their own credit card. So, for people out there in the conservative movement that say, oh, yeah, no, we don't want equality. Women want to stay home and raise babies. Not all women, some do, not all. And, there really hasn't been discrimination. I mean, that's just blatantly false, right? Women couldn't vote until the 20th century. I mean, just so many things that have taken place. And of course, my years as a psychotherapist, I've heard story after story after story of just the worst types of abuse, SA, domestic violence, all of it. And I'm not saying that men don't get abused. I'm not saying that they don't get SA'd. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about women today. So for people in the comments, you don't have to say, well, men have gone through A, B, and C. Yeah, I know. That's not the topic today. So I want you to open up your ears and hear what I'm saying about the plight of women, what women have gone through, and how they're rising up, how they're fighting back. So, looking at Korean women, Korean society is more patriarchal than Western society. And, women have felt a lot of pressure to get married and have the children, and do the thing. And so they've really just said, or some of them have said, we're not doing it. We're just not doing it anymore. And they're going to pursue their own interests. Okay, that's a thing. It's kind of been catching on. I want to take a look at it in a different perspective from more of a Christian perspective. And I know I'm going to get blowback because the traditional Christian message has been get married, have a family, get married, have a family, have a lot of kids, Catholicism, have as many kids, don't use birth control or use the rhythm method, And at this point in 2025, we have to ask ourselves, we have to step back and assess, should that really be the goal at this point with 8 billion people on the planet or close to it? Should that be the goal? And was it ever the goal? We know it was the goal in the Old Testament because, God said, hey, be fruitful and multiply and replenish, right? I've talked about that in other videos. What did replenish mean? How many iterations of earth have we had? And how many times have things been destroyed to the fact that we had to replenish? I don't know. I just like to ask questions. But, he wanted people to procreate. And when I say he, I'm not saying that God is man. I'm not saying that. I'm just using he. So when I look at things now and I look at the New Testament, what did Jesus say? Jesus really didn't say get married and have a bunch of kids. He didn't say that one time. He said, pick up your bed and walk and follow me, right? And he sort of eschewed all tradition, most tradition. And, he was really blazing a new path. And he was really talking about going inside, going within, and figuring out why you're sinning. And again, I know some people don't like that word. I use the word sin just meaning to miss the mark. Where are you screwing up in life? Where are you missing the boat? That's a better way to say it almost. And get right with God, and transform yourself, right? And believe in me. He was the way. And so I did just a little bit of a dive. I didn't do a huge deep swan dive, but I did a bit of a dive into the history of celibacy movements, going all the way back to the early Gnostics. They really, I mean, there were some Gnostics that felt like Earth is a trap. We're here trapped on a prison planet. These bodies are like traps for us, and it didn't make sense to procreate and, have more people trapped here in this fallen realm. And so there were some who really believed in celibacy and practiced it. The Cathars, kind of the same thing, really feeling like they wanted to be sanctified and devoted to God. And so there were some that abstained and lived a more celibate life. And then, we don't have much until the Shakers. And I'm talking about Western uh, in Christian theology. I'm not talking about other religions. I'm sure there could be movements there, but the Shakers, they wanted equality. I think that's interesting, right? Put that hat on for a moment back in the 18th, 19th centuries. They wanted equality and they wanted to be Christ-like. I know there's a lot of people that say Jesus was married, he had a family. We don't have evidence of that. And, if Jesus was really devoted to God, would he really have time for a wife and children? I don't really think so. I think personally, I think he was single, and I think he did his ministry and he traveled, and that was his life, and that was his world, right? Getting people to wake up and believe. Quakers, kind of along the same lines here. Sanctification. So, imitating Christ, sanctifying the body, and full devotion to God. So, if we're devoting ourselves all day long to a wife or a husband and children, we can't really be fully devoted to God the way some people want to be. So again, wasn't everyone, but there were people in these faiths that said, we want to live a celibate life. The modern contemplative laity of the 20th century and 21st century, they're going back to basic spirituality and simplicity, and it was really born out of the Catholic faith. So, for people who didn't want to enter the priesthood or enter the convent and become a nun, they were able to become contemplatives and just live celibate and live a more simple life. And the focus is more prayer, silence, and simplicity. Mm. Um, it sounds nice for a time, maybe like a week, a month, I don't know, of silence and prayer and meditative prayer, those kinds of things. But I don't know, I'm pretty ebullient. I don't know if I could do that forever. And I know a lot of women who feel the same. And so when God called me to be celibate, well, first of all, it was a bit of a quandary because I was married, and it wasn't a great marriage. And when I look back on my failed relationships, and there were several, um, I wasn't healed enough at the time to choose wisely. And I know probably mostly women watching this today, if you think about that, if you've been in that situation with failed relationships or relationships with narcissism, uh, abuse, domestic violence, or, even just discord, like a lot of discord. Perhaps you had a trauma background like me, and, you just, for the life of you, you couldn't choose a suitable mate. And that was me. I just could not choose a suitable mate. And the ones that I did choose that I thought, and at the time I thought they were suitable, of course. Uh, but then it was like they would change. And I realized a while back, my purpose in life, my path, I think I know I was on the enemy's trajectory. And it was like every relationship I entered into just liquefied. And it reminds me of the story of Tobit and Sarah and how she had had 7 husbands and every one of them died on her wedding night because there was a demon tormenting her. And I can kind of relate to that because it's like, gosh, every relationship, they've been married several times, and they just liquefied it, like it all just went to HE double hockey sticks. And looking back now, it's like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't choose the best candidate to begin with, but then I can see where the enemy was getting at me um, through relationships. And I had to ask myself, why? Because I just so badly just wanted to be loved. I wanted to be loved. I wanted a family to love. I'm the most nurturing person, one of the most nurturing people that I know. I love taking care of people. I love making a home, love doing all the things. And it wasn't mine to have, but why? And it all went back to the beginning. It all goes back to the past. My early childhood, being abducted at the age of 3 away from my mom, taken from my dad or by my dad, uh, taken from everything that I knew. My mom was just a loving, kind mother. I remember her and always wanting that back again because when she ended up getting me back, she was a changed person and we were not connected after that. Long story very short, but I always wanted that again. I remember that feeling of just somebody absolutely beaming when they saw me, loving me so much, and I always wanted it. And guys, when you have a wound like that, when you have a need like that, it creates a humongous hole in the etheric field. It's just a gaping wound. You have a wound in your heart, of course, but that radiates out to your energetic field. So I was just a walking target for the enemy. It was like I was such easy prey because they could see me coming from a mile away. How can they see you, by the way? Because you're leaking out your energy. If you have a gaping hole like that, imagine little tiny stars just shooting out of you. And the demonic realm, the other unseen realms, they can see that. And you are a target. And I was a target. So, that's where I get a little sci-fi. Some people call me the sci-fi Christian. Yeah, pretty much. So that was my wound. And when you have a yearning, you put out a negative frequency and a negative vibe because a yearning implies what? It implies lack. And here I was going out and I didn't know I was radiating lack. I thought I was radiating, love me and I'm gonna love you and butterflies and puppy dogs and rainbows. I really thought, and a lot of people did get that sense from me, but the men that honed in on me, that was like, oh, I want to be with her. They were dark. They were dark because they saw this. And actually, a gentleman told me that one time. I said, what made you choose me? He said, well, I could see I can see auras, and yours was absolutely glowing. And I thought to myself, oh, I was glowing. That's great. And then years later, I realized, I wasn't glowing so much as I was leaking. I was leaking. Because if I was truly glowing, I don't think he would have even had the courage or the conviction to approach me. I was leaking. I was leaking energy. So after my last failed relationship, and I'll tell you, it was an epic fail on every level. It was a fail. And I tried so hard, which made it more of a fail. But God spoke to me, and it was sort of a knowing. Sometimes I hear that voice. And so this was a knowing that entered every cell, and it was no more, no more. And I had done a lot of healing work spiritually in therapy, years and years and years. And then, menopause kicked in, which helped, right? Because all of a sudden I have this new spiritual wisdom that just emanated out. And I read one time that when a woman enters menopause, she's no longer getting energy so much from the 3D realm of physicality and the menstrual cycle. Uh, she's now more getting spiritual energy, which is what some people say causes so many hot flashes. So I've never done much to take away the hot flashes. When they come, I just welcome them like, come on. I'm getting a new version of it, a new energetic upgrade, and I'm here for it. So luckily I don't get too many, but uh so when it was a knowing that, wow, okay, and now that I don't have hormones, and by the way, I'm not medicating. I'm a nutritionist, as you guys know, and so I deal with my journey, my menopause naturally, a couple of herbs here and there, no hormones, no bioidentical hormones. I still have plenty of hair. Things are still fine, but I didn't want to prolong that youthful side of me because that's what keeps us, I think, stuck in the cycle. And I'm ready for the wisdom. And the wisdom was when the hormones fell away, that romantic relationships are largely a spell. They're a spell. They're a spell to keep us procreating. And I'm not saying they're bad. But I'm saying for some of us, we want more. We want to step out of the role. And I think every society and every culture has to have those people that are willing to step out of the role. I never did have my own biological children. I've raised several bonus children. I don't have any biological children of my own, and I don't think that's an accident. Um, I think there are some people in society that have to step away and say, you know what? I'll take on this other role. I'm going to radically heal my wounds, my individual wounds, my generational wounds, my collective female wounds, my human wounds. And when we do that, when we take on that role, it trickles out. It trickles out to our loved ones. It trickles out to our family members. It trickles out to the collective. And it's a big task, and God doesn't call everyone to it. So if God is calling you to any kind of celibacy, I want you to pay close attention. It's probably not just because you're like done with men, so sick of the narcissist, so sick of the abusers, so sick of just the man babies. And, I'm not saying this here to be pejorative towards men because I have a lot of male friends who are amazing, amazing. Uh, I have friends who are married to men who are stellar human beings. I'm talking about the unhealed men who will also have a gaping wound, and then the enemy comes in. And what does the enemy do? Infiltrates, and then they attack God's chosen. Mhm. And when I say God's chosen, I mean we're all God's children. I mean the people that God has said, you're going to wake up in this lifetime. You're going to wake up. You're going to figure out some stuff that some people don't figure out. The scales are going to start falling from your eyes. because you have a mission. You have something really important to do here. Really important. And so this is what happens. And so when you see the rampant narcissism going on in today's Western world, and I mean, it's everywhere, but specifically in relationships. And you'll see it in men and you'll see it in women too. But when you see that behavior, it is a spiritual virus that people are getting infected with. Just like you can eat a bad salad and get a parasite, or an uncooked piece of fish and get a parasite. These are spiritual, energetic parasites that enter in and they start taking over a person's hard drive. They do. I want you to think of yourself like a computer with its own battery packed, right? Or pack. So if we're here, we've got the God spark, right? We've got the soul. And some people say we're here as, parts of God experiencing life. Okay, yeah, that could make sense. But everything in the human body, everything you ever do, think, say, it's all recorded. The only way it could possibly all be recorded is if we are some sort of computer. And when I talk about, now obviously we're not just like a computer, we're fancy. We're a fancy plasma computer. Uh, when people get infected, it starts out slow. It starts out with a little thing. Just think about your computer. Your computer, when it gets a virus, maybe it just glitches here and there. And then, over time it glitches, a few more times. And then pretty soon you can't use it, right? And you get pop-ups, and you get all this stuff. And things shut down, and then God forbid you get the black screen, right? So, but that's what happens. It happens slowly, and then eventually, if the person doesn't get an intervention, if they don't get help, if they don't seek therapy, seek spiritual help, it will eventually take them over. So narcissism, just like anything else, is on a spectrum. It's a spectrum disorder. How infected are you? And think about people who use drugs or alcohol. Sometimes they can be so far gone, but then they stop using and they get help and they can really turn it around. But then there's those people that have just done so much brain damage to themselves that even when they stop, they're never quite the same again. Right? So back to the situation. So the person who is disordered, afflicted, I don't like to use the word possessed. I have met possessed people. Most people walking around with narcissism are afflicted. They're afflicted. Um, then they start attacking you. And for today's lesson, I'm going to say the woman, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the woman. I know sometimes that women can be afflicted too, and then they can torment men. I mean, it happens. I've seen it. I've seen it in practice. Uh, but the woman in today's society, we all want love. We all want the fairy tale, right? We all want the children, the home, the vacation, whatever it is. We're programmed to want those things. And we choose someone and we think they're the right choice, right? Sometimes deep down we know they're not, but we think they are at the time enough to marry them. We hope that they change. We know that's not a good recipe, but it just happens sometimes. Uh, and then what happens is slowly that afflicted person will start chipping away the self-esteem, chipping away at their peace, creating chaos, becoming abusive. And it's intermittent, right? It happens, and then they might say sorry, or it doesn't happen again for a while, and then you make excuses. Well, they were under stress. Well, they were drinking. Well, well, they had a rough childhood, and that was me. I always said, oh, this person, because I'm in my background in psychotherapy, this person just had a rough childhood, and if I get them the right kind of help, if they watch the right videos with me, if they read the self-help book, then yes, they're gonna heal. We're gonna be great together. It never happened. It never happened. So when God spoke to me and said, "You're done," I prayed about it. I was like, really? Because I feel like I got a lot of love to give. And yeah, I do, but it's going to look a little bit differently. And of course, what had to happen first is I had to turn that love to me. And, I always thought I loved myself. I thought I did. I was like, well, I take care of myself, I exercise, I eat right, I try to get rest, I read, you know, books all the time, I read my Bible, I go to church, I do all of the things. Um, I didn't love myself enough because I was still letting abusive people in my atmosphere, in my home. And abuse doesn't have to look like somebody punching you or kicking you or pushing you. Emotional abuse, psychological abuse are just as damaging, and we still don't recognize them in this society, largely. We still don't. So I said, God, okay, so God had, called me to start an online movement, an online church, and I was very excited about that. I was blown away. I was like, me? What? Why? But I said, all right, I'm going to do this. And then that next piece was, and you're going to be alone, not alone, because you're going to have Christ. And I didn't really know what that meant. I've always prayed, I've always, you know, but I know now. Wow. And, there's that story in the Bible of the woman at the well who's been divorced several times. Jesus very kindly calls her out and says, I've got the living water. She's like, what is this living water? I want it. And then he tells her, by the way, I'm the Messiah. And that was the first person that he told, and I felt like, wow, I'm ready for the living water. I'm ready. I don't know exactly what it looks like or what it feels like, but I'm ready. And it was funny, but a couple of years ago for my birthday, hang on, I'm going to show you this. I had this made for myself. Check this out. This is me and our homie Jesus with the living water. Well, and my little puppy. And I said, you know what? I don't know what it fully feels like or what it looks like, but this is going to be a really good reminder for me because I am ready. And how do I know that I'm ready? I can't possibly eat another poop sandwich. And that was menopause, yay. But God spoke it very clearly. And God said, you've got to purify the body. Now, sex between married couples can probably be amazing, right? For me, I largely felt like that human bag of Doritos. And after a while, it just felt terrible. It just felt awful. And it was damaging energetically. And I didn't realize it at the time because I'm a person who's like, oh, do your wifely duty. It was so damaging. And so when God said no more, uh, I felt it in my cells. And I was like, okay, no more. What a relief. And then, so other things happened. I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be alone, at least for the foreseeable future. And I really started to understand what that living water felt like and looked like. And it was healing those wounds because I also had a fear. I don't know if it was a fear of being alone, because I like to be alone. I love my solitude. I love my alone time. But it was almost like a fear of missing out. I didn't have it in childhood, and dang it, I deserve to have it now. And I'm entitled to have it now. I'm entitled to a decent, wonderful husband. And you know what? Maybe I did deserve it. It just wasn't in the cards. And when I accepted that I accepted, now, and it's so funny because now I feel very healed enough to choose an amazing partner but I don't want one anymore. Isn't that irony? I don't want a partner anymore. And maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe that'll be different. I sort of doubt it, but maybe. Uh, but at the end of the day, I said, I know so many women who would love to feel not to be alone out of bitterness and be like, oh, I can't stand men. I don't want another one in, to grace my presence. Uh, but out of a place of pure empowerment, I'm choosing to be married to Jesus in a sense, right? Not like, well, kind of like a nun, but in your own way, right? And I do, I wear a ring. I'm like, you know what? I am married to my faith and to the one who gives the living water. That means I don't ever have to thirst again. I don't ever have to yearn because in the end, it's not even real. What is the purpose of having a life mate? What's the purpose? The purpose, one purpose, is that they'll bring out those wounds in you to help you heal. Now, I will say my marriage did do that, right? Definitely all of my relationships did that to some degree. They all, and the last one was like the grand finale brought up every little thing that I didn't even know was lurking and hiding. Um, Issues I had with my brother, with my mom, with my dad, with my sister, they all culminated. It was like some big symphony of wounds. And it was like, all right, deal with every single one, every one. And I did. I did. And I still am, but I'm largely just healed now. And I don't think everybody says, well, no, you can't really heal it when you're alone. You have to heal in a relationship. No, not for me. I had to face being completely alone. Hey, what if no one, no person ever loves you again? What if? Are you okay? Are you still whole? Are you still joyful? Yeah, yeah. And when you experience the love of Christ, not in the traditional way, um, the true way that Jesus spoke, and he says, you're my friends. When you really see Jesus as your best friend and your biggest fan, that's when it all changes. And go back to the beginning when God made Adam. He didn't make him as half of the whole. He made Eve later, but he was a whole being on his own. And that's what we have to remember. I'm a whole being. I'm not one half of the whole, right? So the goal of relationship is to bring out what is unconscious and unhealed in you so that you can heal it. And do I think a lot of people can do that in marriage and then go on to live, wonderful married lives? Yeah, I do. But I think what happens to most people is they don't do that. Most people have the kids, get the mortgage, get all the bills, and they live life to get to the next moment. And they're so busy that they can't really consciously raise their children. It's like, okay, did you do your homework? Did you brush your teeth? Did you clean your room? Great. Did you go to soccer practice? Great. But are they really teaching their kids the real important life lessons? Largely no. And I think that's why we see so much just struggle in the teen world, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gender dysphoria, all the things. We see it just, and unaliving even. We see it on such a broad scale now because these kiddos aren't taught the real meaning of life, the most important things, the things that, why we're here, why they're here, how to figure out your life purpose, how to cultivate a value system. We're not teaching kids that stuff. And then, when we're not doing the homework and the brushing of the teeth, then it's like, okay, now it's entertainment time. And that makes sense. I get it. You want to go to the zoo, you want to go to the movies, you want to go see Disney on Ice. I get it. But again, we're not taking the time to give your children a spiritual path. And so I'm not saying everyone needs to stop having kids. I'm not saying everyone needs to become celibate. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is we've been kind of sold a bill of goods. We've been sold this American dream that really isn't so much of a dream anymore. And if you have been burned by that, or if you are newly single, or if you're saying, I don't want that lifestyle anymore. I want a more intentional lifestyle. And you can do that while still being married and have kids, by the way. But today I'm talking about something that I call Christo Holos. Christo Holos. Can you see that one? Christoholos, holos, Greek for meaning whole and complete, is when you practice Christoholos, you are already a full, complete being. You don't need a partner. So this is a time, it doesn't have to be forever. It could be for, you know, a month, 6 months, a year, 5 years, your life, who knows? But this is where you focus on your relationship with yourself and with Christ. And this is where you dig up the wounds. This is where you cultivate joy, the true joy of being alive, even in a fallen, broken world. If you're overweight, this is the time that you say, you know what, I'm going to conquer this because food is my escape. And it's a darn good one sometimes, isn't it? But I don't want to be overweight. I want to be healthy. I want to be fit. I want to be whole in Christ. So I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to conquer it. If you're feeling depression, this is where you're going to figure out why. And, whether you get some therapy or counseling, some spiritual counseling, maybe you join a group. Maybe you join flight school and come work with me. So excited to launch flight school. This is going to be where we learn how to fully dedicate ourselves to Christ in a modern way, in a bit of a sci-fi way, looking at the whole being, our body, our mind, our spirit, our soul, looking at the core delusions of this realm and how to break free from them, helping you drop the scales from your eyes, helping you hear the voice of God more clearly. So Christoholos is a time for true dedication to you in Christ. So, Christoholos, we're celibate. And what this means is we don't date. You can talk to men. You can have male friends. We don't flirt. We don't masturbate. Um, And the reason for that is we're just purifying. We're purifying. Uh, we we don't think sexual thoughts. If we have a sexual thought, we channel it into creativity. Now, a lot of times, those sexual urges and are right along with those survival urges. They come from below the waist, the first three chakras, and typically it's the second chakra where the sexual energy is. And so one of the things, and I'll teach it in flight school, one of the things we do when we feel the sexual urge, we channel it up through the third and the fourth chakra and go, let me turn this into something creative. Libido doesn't mean sex drive, it means life force energy. This is our life force energy. And I noticed in the past, like when I would get that urge, it was often when I would feel powerless. The same time I would like crave a cookie, something like that. I'm either feeling really happy and I want to celebrate, or I'm feeling powerless somewhere. So I often have people go, okay, list out every area of your life that you feel powerless, and let's address it one by one. But this, unfortunately, the enemy has just been attacking men full force. And men, women, we have our own weaknesses, and men have their weaknesses: hubris, ego, money, status, power. Sex, um, escapism through drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, that stuff. And so even men in the church, and I've noticed this so many times, every time I open up my computer, another pastor has been cheating on his wife, or another pastor has been caught with, you know, sex workers, using drugs, whatever the case, they're falling because they got a wound. And a lot of times, the research shows that men who are called to the pulpit, not necessarily the priesthood, but the pulpit, especially in evangelical Christianity, they tend to have more narcissistic energy. They want the attention, they want the accolades. And then when you get into the church, it's very much run like a business. And so it's like, get the money, get the money, get the money, build the big church, build the big church. And Christ has really called me back to now simple. And that's why my online church will never have a building. It'll never have to raise all this money for, anything. If you want to make a donation, that's great. That's on you. I appreciate it, but it's not warranted. And humble, humble. Uh, I consider myself a fledgling. And you know what a fledgling is? Fledglings fly for a little bit, they just come out of the nest and then they pop back down and they fly and they come back down. And we're all learning how to soar, which is why I call my online community flight school. We are all learning how to fly. I'm still learning. And I think God is calling a lot of women, not just for this, but also to be in places of leadership because we lead in such a different way and we lead with so much more heart. Typically, I'm not talking about all men versus women, but a lot of us, we lead with our heart and our head. We can be very congruent. And that's what is needed. That is what is needed now. And that's what's always been needed. Now, when we get into the hierarchies, when we get into all of that, and the patriarchy, women don't fare very well. So I think I don't think we have to go here necessarily, but I think this is where women can really focus on themselves and their relationship with the divine. Now, I'm all about, prayer and silence here and there, but I'm a very lively person. I'm an Italian. I can't sit in silence for very long. So I'm looking at this movement as a joyful movement. I want to live my best life. I want to have fun with my lady friends. I want to go, you know, go on trips or at least go to events or go thrifting with my girlfriends and out to lunch. And, I want to celebrate my femininity in a way that I don't have to anymore. I don't have to make the man a sandwich. And nothing against Candace Owens. I think she has tremendous gifts. I think she's a little bit younger. I think she lucked out in the husband department. She doesn't know what a lot of us have been through. So I know she's promoting her book, Make Him a Sandwich. I'll probably read it just to see what she says. But I ain't making any more sandwiches, guys. I'm not. I'll make myself a sandwich. I don't eat sandwiches, but I'll make myself a meal. I'll feed the people in my community before I make a man a sandwich at this point. Uh, but what I want to say is it's time. I see so many women online now saying, nope, I've been single forever. I'm happy. I'm doing it like this. I'm doing it like that. Men, we need to send them a message. We are not the built-in help. We are not the built-in maid. We're not the activities director. We're not the scheduler. We're not the, women, we are so attentive to detail. And, it's great if you get the luxury of being a stay-at-home mom and that's what you want to do, but most women are still working and taking care of kids and taking care of a home. And, at the end of the day, they don't have time for those flute lessons, or they don't have time to go, study their Italian, or they don't have the money to plan a trip. I can't tell you, every time I've been single, I always have more money than when I'm in a relationship and or married. And I think, how is this possible? Because we've got this dual income, but yet there's less money. Confounding. But at the end of the day, I think men, some men anyway, they need a wake up call. And Krista Holos, I'm going to list out if you are interested in this movement. Join the newsletter. Go to the website, churchofchristos.com or sparrowspalding.com. Sign up for the newsletter. I'm going to give so much information on this. There'll be more videos to come. But at the end of the day, our goal is to balance the masculine and feminine in us. We don't have to seek it out. Everyone talks about the polarity. The polarity is here. We don't need to find it out here. The polarity is here. And like Jesus said, when we get to the heavenly realms, we kind of live like the angels. We don't get married. There's really even no gender there. And, even when you dig into Catholic theology and catechism, they don't think that God is male or female. Most people don't know that. But the gender had to happen on this earth, in this realm, for the procreation. Okay. Uh, but we will transcend the gender, and we do, right? But that is the goal. The goal here is we don't have to look outside of ourselves for a romantic love relationship that's going to complete us. We are already complete. Your love is inside here. You can't ever leave you, according to Eckhart Tolle, right? It's always with us and it never goes away. But the goal, I think, now for people who are waking up out of this matrix is to realize that the masculine and the feminine are in here, and we don't need to seek it outside of ourselves to balance any polarity. That's the 3D realm, but we're moving into the higher dimensions if we, can really heal our wounds and just realize that we don't have to yearn, and we don't have to seek, and we don't have to search. We just have to connect, and not to another person necessarily, but to connect to Jesus, connect to our higher power. If this resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you know of a woman who would benefit from hearing this, please vote forward this video onto her, because I think you're going to see a lot of women saying, you know what? This really resonates with me. And check out the Church of Christos. Again, my Christian views are not necessarily the traditional Christian views. I mean, they are to some degree, but I really encourage you to think outside the box. I encourage you to also think mystically. And by the way, my book that just came out, The Christos Cleanse, 40 days of total transformation, mind, body, spirit, soul, all of it. Amazing prayers in the back. This is to help you consecrate, help you cleanse. And when you cleanse the body physically and really purge the spirit, that's when we can start to hear the voice of God so much more clearly. And I want that for everyone. So click the link, check out the Christos Cleanse. I think you'll love it. As always, guys, hug yourselves from me, and we'll see you next time.